Hello and welcome to Drop the Mic Podcast, where we discuss technology, theology, and all things in between. I want to personally thank you for joining us today. Now sit back, relax, share this, engage with the podcast that's already in progress. God bless you. What's up, everybody? This is your boy DK Hammonds, and I have Pastor Raymond Chang. He's not just a preacher, but he's a prophetic voice in a divided world. President of the Asian American Christian Collaborative, as well as the executive director at 10 by 10, here with us today. He's lived in 5 continents, worked in business, nonprofits, churches. Y'all give it up for Pastor Raymond Chang. We're so glad that you're here, my friend and brother. Thank you for coming by, man. How you feeling today?
I feel great with the solo applause. So that was the first. And appreciate the warm and friendly welcome.
Yeah, man. So some of our audience may not be familiar with your work. Kind of walk us through what it is that you do, how you do it, and how you impact discipleship in the world that we live in now.
Yeah, so I mean, I've worked in and out of the church,
Of course.
and grew up in the church all my life. The church has been, essential for my life and my being, and at the same time, the church has always kind of been the place of my greatest joys and my greatest pains. I've experienced so much tension and conflict. I've seen so many churches split. I've seen so many good relationships go sour and so on and so forth. And at the same time, I don't lose hope for it. And so really grateful to my ancestors for being of the faith and continuing the faith. I'm 8th generation Christian, which is a really significant thing for a Korean American. And then, I started the Asian American Christian Collaborative about 5 years ago as the pandemic COVID-19 virus was impacting the world, and there was a rise in anti-Asian sentiments and prejudice. And so we mobilized to address the kind of the growing racial animosities, and then also work at Fuller Seminary as an executive in the 10 by 10 collaboration.
Yeah, man. So you are no stranger to tension and life and these heavy conversations. But for those of y'all who don't know, he has this nice t-shirt on. Let's start there. Tell me about this t-shirt and tell me what does it say to you, bro?
Yeah, this is my favorite shirt to wear like out in public because people just don't know what to do with it. It says Asian American Christians for Black Lives and Dignity. And it's a church that we printed, during our initial march after George Floyd was murdered.
Yes.
And so we wanted to show up in solidarity with the African American community, but all of humanity, because what happens to one of us happens to all of us. And as I was marching with different communities, especially with Black pastors, every now and then I would get this nudge from one of them and they would say, "Hey, man, we're all Asian Americans." And I live in Chicago. I love Chicago. And it's a beautiful city. It's a diverse city, but it's a city that only has about 5% Asian Americans that make up its population. So it's about a third Black, a third white, and a third Latino. And so for me, I'm seeing the Asian Americans out and about in the streets. They're out there with us and they're, marching with me. And I'm seeing many friends that are out there marching for, alongside the African American community. But I understood what they kept mentioning. Not only was it an issue of the lack of kind of the population mass, I do think that there's something special that happens when we go a step above and beyond and we organize for and we mobilize for and with other communities. And so a lot of what I was doing early on was just marching with, and then we moved from marching with to mobilizing for. And so we mobilized in a march for Black Lives and Dignity that started in Chinatown of Chicago at a historic Chinese American church. And then it went to a historic Black church called the Progressive Baptist Church, pastored by my friend, the Reverend Dr. Charlie Dates, and a lot of other great people there, like Jamal Johnson and Chelton and Emanuela, and I mean, you just go down the list, and there's some
Yeah.
really wonderful people on the pastoral staff, and and we had somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 people show up. So it was awesome to see the majority of people, and it was a multiracial march. So you had people there, you had Black people there, you had Latinos there, and it was amazing to see all that. But then the majority of people had Black hair, beautiful almond shaped eyes, a little bit of olive-ish skin, and originated from from the East, and so we were really thrilled that we could be together in that way. From Filipinos to Indians to Koreans to Chinese and Japanese folk. We had a whole bunch of Christians marching for Black lives, praying together along the streets, and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, it's part of the work that we were doing.
Man, amazing work. I got a chance to kind of watch the videos that you guys did, as well as some of the social media content that I saw. And if you go back and look at some of his videos, the T-shirt makes its appearance in the videos all the way. And that's one of the intriguing things, because I feel like when we're talking about Black Lives Matter, people instantly get tense, instantly feel a way about hearing something like this, or even Asian Lives Matter. We instantly want to, default to all lives matter for some odd reason or enough. And so just to see a person outside of myself doing the work similar to what I do in Dallas is always refreshing. And I want to tell you, thank you for the continued effort that you have done to bring us, somewhat together in this divided racial world that we live in. So
Yeah,
thank you for
thank
that,
you.
man.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you,
So
DK. Thanks for all you do.
yeah, man. So let's now we have a certain person that sits in a certain seat that may be making policy that's against even our people group. How should we as a community be fighting or be engaging when we have such this tension that exists from a authoritative regime?
Yeah, no, and we are in remarkable times, like
Yes.
remarkably troubling times, because I think one, we're we're facing the threats of authoritarianism in ways that feel normal and
Yeah.
almost dismissible. Most people, I think, currently believe that things are not as bad or not going to be as bad as they potentially and likely will be. And I keep thinking about Martin Niemöller's poem. I don't know um, if you've heard it. I'm sure that you heard it. It's a poem called "First They Came."
Mhm.
First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out
Yes.
because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. And Martin Niemöller was, I think, a Lutheran pastor,
Yes.
who was basically watching what was going on around, Germany at the time, and
Yes.
essentially saying, well, it's happening over there. And what I find in the US throughout the country right now is that there's a lot of people acting as if all those things that are happening in DC and Texas and in other states are not going to eventually catch up to them where they are. That we care more about how much the price of gas is or the price of orange juice is or the price of eggs are, which are all really important issues, right? We should care about all those things, especially if there's some sort of price gouging taking place. But more than we care about what's happening at the borders, within schools, within churches. I was just talking to a friend, and he was talking about, how with the ending of the TPS program and policy, which gives people protected status. The people that followed the proper protocol and legal means to enter into the U.S. because they were essentially being persecuted or experiencing danger, that status has been removed. And so I just heard of a church in Atlanta of a bunch of Haitians where there's like 300 of them, and they just all lost their status at once. And this church is now scrambling to survive. And if you don't know about it, you can go and look it up on the Atlanta Journal. There's a church in a Persian church or an Iranian church of Iranian Christians in California. And 40 of them lost their status, and they all came because they were being persecuted for being Christian in Iran. And now they're essentially being told they are not welcome here to a country that so-called supposedly celebrates Christians. And these are all people that came here legally, followed the proper processes, had all their documents, and then with one bill, the big beautiful bill, that all that ended. And so there's a lot to be concerned about. And these are not just them. I mean, I'm hearing stories all over the country. I hear stories of people that are trying to figure out what to do with their undocumented congregants, who came here as refugees and are trying to figure out how do they make a life for themselves with people that are afraid that their dreamer statuses are going to be removed, and so on and so forth. So there's just a lot of things to be worried about, and there's a lot of stuff that the church can kind of get involved in.
Yeah, definitely a lot of things to be worried about, especially when you live in the great state of Texas, where our democratic people voted by the people, have had to take refuge in the great state of Chicago. And so we want to continue to keep them lifted in prayer as they continue to fight for justice for people and humanity across the board. Because to your point, if this goes through in something like Texas, then Florida, then West Virginia, then all the other places are going to follow suit to want to do the same. And it's our job, both digitally and physically, to make sure that we are aware of the issues, that we are taking the proper stances, and that we are become more aware. And I wanted to bring my platform, and even though I talk about digital discipleship, I feel like this is an important part of digital discipleship that many people kind of overlook because they want to assimilate people into their churches very fast so they can get volunteer work and all of that kind of stuff. So, brother, if I was a new pastor in this current climate and I needed a strategy to start to engage this conversation of justice, where could I start?
I think on a variety of levels. One is to understand that our call is to be citizens of the kingdom before we're citizens of any empire. And so we have to prioritize the kingdom above every empire of the world. And what that means is that we have to embody the values of God's kingdom above all, which includes the ways in which we treat our neighbors and our enemies, as well as the ways in which we involve ourselves in proclaiming the good news and the gospel to the world through word, as well as demonstrating the gospel through deed. And I think we have to look at things both from an individual lens of like what we are to do as individual people, but also through communal lenses, which is why I believe like there is something powerful about churches moving forward together to really care for the marginalized, the oppressed, the poor, and the sick. And at the same time, addressing the conditions that lead people to get sick. And so I think there's a sense of which I think we need a more robust theology of the kingdom of God. We need a more robust biblical theology. We need a more robust understanding of personal and social justice and righteousness. At the same time, we also need to become more aware of the issues that are taking place in the world, in our communities, and even within our church families. There's so much that happens that people aren't familiar with. And as pastors, you can't know everything, but you should know enough to have a pulse of where the Spirit of God might be calling the whole church to engage in. Because when the world looks at the church, they see a church that's either hyper polarized and has been co-opted and corrupted by partisan politics, or they see a church that's basically apathetic. And so we as Christians know that there is no solution that is fully kingdom either on the Democratic or the Republican side. Sadly, there does seem to be a sentiment, and a false sentiment, that a lot of people believe that if you are a Republican, you are a Christian, and if you're a Christian, you have to be a Republican. Nowhere in the Bible do we see that Jesus endorses a donkey or an elephant. Jesus is the Lamb of God. And so we have to make sure that, we are kind of emulating the Lamb first. In addition to the awareness stuff, I think, there's a capacity issue. A lot of pastors are busy, they're tired, they have a lot going on. In addition to being kind of deeply rooted in the word, and there's so much in the Bible itself where if you just preach from the scriptures, it will have something substantial and meaningful to say to the issues of our day, whether it's a social issue or a political issue or some other thing that's going on in the world, or an ethical issue.
Mm.
If you are not an expert in it and you don't have the time to become an expert, there are people in your community that you can probably tap into expertise for. Appoint a committee, appoint a task force to say, okay, where does our Christian witness lead us on these issues? Where does our discipleship call us to become more informed, and at least give our members and the family of God that's meeting within our local context something significant and substantial to hold on to, so that they grow in awareness, so that they're not ignoring what's happening on the other side of the tracks, on the other side of the border, or even in different parts of the country. Because again, we are all intricately woven in the same fabric through the same thread as people made in the image of God. And we do care as Christians about what happens to all those, especially the most vulnerable. Use that task force and committee to inform you in your preaching, to inform you in your justice efforts, your mercy efforts within the church community, and to figure out how you can mobilize as a result. Sharing stuff on social media is always helpful. If you find something helpful as a media clip, always share that. If you find something helpful as a long form, digital content, share that. If you find an article helpful, share that. There's so much out there that you can now share. And thanks to, Google and ChatGPT, like there's really no excuse for you having and being able to find an answer to a question. Now, of course, you still have to use discernment. We have an information crisis and a discernment crisis when it comes to all the information out there, where people are buying into all sorts of falsehoods and conspiracy theories. But beyond that, I would say we need to not be afraid of doing the actual work of discipleship and calling people to understand what it means to follow Jesus in a broken, polarized, divided world, where everyone is calling for our affections, from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party to, all those who are kind of hoarding their wealth in a variety of ways and not practicing the type of generosity that you see modeled in the kingdom, and live a more compelling and beautiful witness in light of that.
What a great thought process as it relates to discipleship, because many of us have various definitions of discipleship. And I think people get it confused with assimilation. People get it confused with all of the processes, but I love your justice lens as it relates to how you're approaching discipleship and how that's so critical. So here's a question for you. Can a pastor, a leader with prosperity movements and the rise and fall of personality-driven ministry, can a pastor in those spaces be both pastoral and prophetic, in your opinion?
I think you have to be, right? You have to be both pastoral and prophetic. The threefold kind of office of Christ was prophet, priest, and king. And I don't know of any pastor that can avoid kind of having all three of those things reflected in their ministry. What's challenging today is that the prophetic ministry for a large segment, especially of the white church, has been missing. And so there's plenty of it within the Black church, but even the Black church can sometimes deviate from it because it drinks a little bit too much of the white Kool-Aid. And same is true for Asian American and Latino churches. And it's not about like individual white people that we're talking about. It's about this ideological commitment to from not seeing race as a real feature of life in America and faith in America to outright, racism and white supremacy, which, are real forces that still operate. And if you don't believe that, all you have to do is look at some of the marches that are to unite the right or seeking to exterminate Jews or seeking to go against diversity efforts or seeking to call issues of justice, like woke, some sort of woke agenda, and the misappropriation of the word and
Awoke.
terminology of woke,
Yes.
which if you know anything about Black history and the Black community, it was simply calling Black people to stay aware of what's going on around them. Like it was like I don't know how it got weaponized to basically encompass everything that is about like dismantling America, which it's not about. Staying woke is not about dismantling the country or the fabric of the country. It's just about saying, hey, let's just be aware of what's
Be
happening in this
aware.
country.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I think that's so important because there are some leaders who have definitely weaponized the word woke. And yes, from our diaspora, woke is, hey man, stay on your P's and Q's. You don't know what's about to happen, and you need to have your head on the swivel at all times. And to see how this word has been gentrified, if you will, into something into something that it shouldn't have been is baffling to me. It's almost a loss for words because you see woke or you see this other terminology, snowflakes, that they bring up all the time. You're just like, those two things just doesn't meet the criteria that you guys are trying to reach for. And I get where you're trying to go, and it's still kind of not hitting. And so I appreciate that thought, brother. So let's continue on this path, man, because you've answered a lot of the questions just in your thought process, and I appreciate that. What moment made you realize discipleship had to be race conscious?
Yeah. I mean, I think the moment where I realized that it wasn't just about converting an individual heart. And so I always thought, because I grew up in the evangelical tradition where individualism is key and king, and there's no such things as systems and structures, and systemic and structural sin doesn't really exist. And if you think it does, then you become some sort of like compromised Christian. I realize that a lot of that is a result of Christians not knowing how not to be in control. Like it's so much easier to be in control if you can isolate an individual, focus on the individual, and then either press pass or reject on them. You can either kind of form them into the image that you think that they need to be, or the image that even God wants them to be, or dismiss them because they don't fit the mold. And I just realized that type of manufactured discipleship that only focuses on the individual is so anemic and it's so inadequate, because as I was interacting with people from different groups, it's not hard to come to the realization that some people are just ignorant and have the privilege of being ignorant about the woes that other groups and other people have to deal with on a regular basis, and then end up perpetuating some of the problems that emerge against those groups simply because they have the luxury of being ignorant. And so when I found myself in kind of white evangelical institutions, one of the things I saw was that everything was set up to benefit kind of the white suburban middle class, upper middle class evangelical, upper class evangelical. And I realized it wasn't just neglecting other communities, it was actually at the detriment and expense of some of the other communities.
Yes.
And it was extracting from the other communities in order to provide and essentially maintain this kind of traditioned approach to something that was only designed for, one particular group. And
Yes.
so everything from where we went to retreat, going into and I appreciate Black folk and all minorities that like to go camping, but I mean, that's not me. And that's traumatized a lot of black, especially Black students who were like,
Yes.
no, we did they would say my grandparents worked hard so that we never had to sleep in the woods again. And so like when you would bring those things up, which were systemically designed and decided upon, right, and it impacted the whole community, and you got a lot of pushback, you realize, oh, this is one way of preserving inequity is by showing essentially favoritism, which Jesus calls a sin, right?
Yes.
Towards one group
Yes.
at the expense of another. And so there are 1,000 things like that, policies that are, unmeasured, unjustly weighted towards one group or another, and so on and so forth. But I think it's when I realized, like, oh, you can't just change individual hearts. You actually have to change structures and policies,
Yes.
and the allocation of resources, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, man. I worked in a church that was multi-ethnic, multicultural by its premise. And as a Black man, I couldn't really have good conversations about my humanity as a Black person and where I lived, or the things that I may have experienced, especially a person who's gone traditionally to African American churches and to this space. And that kind of got looked over a lot, just because we didn't want to kind of go there as it relates to our ethic and how we view justice for people of all diasporas. And so that church would probably say, well, that was our intent, but it actually happens in real time, whether we want to say it does or not does. And so that's something that's happened to me. And so I'm very aware that I get a chance to go into these spaces, and I try not to bring that preconceived bias and try to give people that opportunity to show me the Christ in them, so that I can say, you know what, that's not my experience over there. That's not my experience with this business person. This is my experience, and it's more in a Christological lens than any other lens. And that's always been my premise, because I get the chance, like I said, work with people from all over. And as I show up in these spaces, it's difficult for a lot of them to receive somebody like me with the intelligence that I have that can add to what they're doing all the time. So thank you for that, brother. As we wrap up, because I only want to do it for a few more minutes and give you back more of your time. First of all, where can people find you via social, and how can they engage your work once they end this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, and to your point, I just want to say, I wish that what you shared was not so common, right? That's the hard
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
That the multi-ethnic church movement of the 90s, and this goes to your question about, like, why do we need race conscious discipleship?
Yes.
The multi-ethnic church movement, the reason it essentially failed, in the sense of, like, not like just moving towards, oh, there's more multi-ethnic diverse churches, because we're also seeing, like, a lot of decline away from churches and disaffiliation from churches. The reason it failed is because it failed to address the racial dynamics and the racial kind of patterns that kept emerging in these communities, and basically perpetuated all of the problems of a racialized society within the church, and a racialized church that's never kind of reckoned with things along racial lines. And so all I see is a wake of devastation from the multi-ethnic church movement. Like, there's some, and then we celebrate a few bright spots, a few good spots, and usually the churches that are, like, thriving still within the multi-ethnic and the multiracial church movement are churches that were, like, soundly committed to the Word of God and soundly committed to all forms of social and racial justice. But those are far and few in between. Right. And so those are the only multi-ethnic, multiracial churches that I think are still flourishing. Otherwise, you see a wake of dead bodies, all Black, brown, and Asian, that have been kind of devastated and destroyed by these communities. And a lot of that is simply because they just never engaged with racial dynamics and racial realities. And so, yeah, I just wish that things were different. I wish that the church could kind of get better. And I think that's kind of the work that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
If people want to connect, I'm on Instagram, Ray Chang 502. I'm on Twitter, but Twitter's a dumpster fire. I'm on Threads, tweet Ray Chang. I'm on Threads, Ray Chang 502, and then of course I'm sure I'm on Blue Sky, or like Raymond Chang or something like that.
Yeah.
And so people can connect with me there.
Good, man. Good. Let's do rapid fire. Rapid fire. All right. What's your favorite sports team?
Oh, the Chicago Blackhawks.
Okay. All right.
That's the one thing you can judge me on.
Blackhawks. Okay. All right. So if you had a chance, one-way plane ticket anywhere in the country you could go to right now, all expense paid, where would you go?
Oh, Hawaii all day long.
Oh, man. I need
Any
to go
island.
to Hawaii. My favorite place is Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, for all the right reasons. It's one of my
that's
favorite
not in
places.
the country. You said in the country.
Oh, okay. Out of the country. Where would you go? If you were out of the country.
Oh man, I there's too many places, but I haven't been to Korea in a long time, so I wouldn't mind going back to Seoul. I love the countries in Europe, just all the history and the heritage there, and the buildings. I want to go to Argentina, take my wife there.
Yeah.
I'd love to go back to South Africa. Just take me anywhere.
Yeah.
Take me to Mexico. I'll go to Mexico. I want to go to Mexico.
Hey, I love Mexico for all the right reasons. I'm telling you. All right. Last question. If you had one scripture that just speaks to your soul, which one is it?
I think right now it's do not be anxious about anything, but in everything through prayer and supplication, offer their petitions to the Lord. I think there's something about us living in an anxious age and people recognizing that anxiety and being reminded that, the remedy, at least the first line of remedy to anxiety, is prayer, like true prayer, not this performative, false, just kind of like checklist type of prayer, but like deep communion with God, where you're unloading your burdens onto God and seeing the beauty of God being able to carry them all. There's just something, powerful about that.
Amazing. Brother Ray, thank you for your time with us today. Good people, make sure you subscribe, follow Brother Ray and all of his work. He's an amazing thought leader, writer, and human being that I got a chance to follow and now speak to. And so I can check that off my list as we continue to push ahead. Thank y'all for listening. We appreciate it. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. My hope is that the podcast added value to your life. Please, please, please subscribe from your favorite application, leave us a review, and even follow us on YouTube for your up-to-date information. Thank you. Peace.